Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. Andrea Lucas, who is a commissioner of the EEOC, published an article warning that race-conscious corporate diversity programs may violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, or national origin. Mr. Rokita, in your written testimony, I'm quoting from it now, it says, DEI programs that consider a job applicant or employee's race or color in hiring, retention, promotion, and other terms, conditions, or privileges of employment could be considered unlawful under Indiana's Civil Rights Act. Is that also true under federal law?
Thank you for the question. Yes, Indiana's law in several respects mirrors the federal law. So the point there I was making is that Title VII prohibits race-conscious employment actions, period, full stop. It doesn't matter how the program's labeled.
Ms. Stepman, is that how you say that? Okay. In your written testimony, you say something similar. It said, instead of upholding a system in which all employees, regardless of their race, sex, or other characteristics irrelevant to work performance, are judged on their merit, talent, qualifications, grit, intelligence, or any other of the myriad qualities that make a good hire, too often, Title VII in practice as it exists today not only fails to do so, it does the opposite. How so, and can you expand on that, please?
Sure. Again, we have this same story of over and under enforcement. On the one hand, completely ignoring publicly delivered and announced racial quotas, and I'm sorry, announcing that 30% of your workforce will be of a particular race by a particular date is a quota. It is an obvious quota. It's the kind of obvious quota that even university admissions departments cannot say or are reluctant to say even before SFFA, and it's forbidden by Title VII. Somehow, these companies have very little fear of announcing these things to the press, and while on the other hand, they do have to be careful when, for example, as the Sheets case that's been repeatedly brought up here, they use a neutral qualification like not, or screening out job applicants who have felonies on their record. The sort of policy considerations about that, about mainstreaming, inmates back into society, those are irrelevant to the point. This is a neutral qualification that the employer is using, and yet they find themselves, having to show being on the defensive and having to show this very tight connection to the job in the way that the EEOC enforces Title VII. So on the one hand, we have a neutral qualification that is, and people are being hauled into court for using it. On the other hand, we have blatant racial quotas that are being ignored by the EEOC.
So, Mr. Berry, you wrote the EEOC has defended DEI initiatives in the workplace even when those initiatives create the very Title VII violations that the EEOC is entrusted to stamp out. Expand on that, please.
Certainly. So the Commission has taken the position we've seen a couple times today, which is to equivocate between the existence of disparities and actual intentional discrimination. And repeatedly, over and over again, the Commission has declined to take action against companies that are saying the quiet part out loud. They are saying, we are going to have, come hell or high water, greater percentages of certain racial categories reflected, not because we've done a labor market analysis, but because we think that a certain kind of racial balancing is appropriate. The exact kind of interest the Supreme Court has said is grossly inappropriate.
And so does that get to what you talk about in your testimony extensively about disparate impact liability?
Yes, exactly. Disparate impact liability is very inconsistently enforced and is not being brought to bear, as best I can tell, against the widespread practice of college degree requirements as a screening mechanism.
Mr. Rokita, is tying one's continued employment or pay to statistical data, which Ms. Stedman has talked about as being perhaps a quota, is that in any way aspirational and protected?
No, I don't think so.
Ms. Stedman, any comment?
Yeah, I guess my only comment would be that I agree with my fellow witness that the real disagreement here is whether any disparity, whether racial, sex, or on any other basis, is suspect immediately as created by discrimination. There are disparities in everything. There is virtually no qualification that an employer could ever set that would have no race or sex disparities. So that's when the EEOC looks at the issue in this way, what it really does is expands its own power because it's arbitrary. Whatever issue the EEOC looks at, whatever qualification will spit out some kind of disparity. But they don't look at other qualifications, as my witness also said, my fellow witness. For example, using college degrees as a qualification. Fewer men have college degrees. Fewer Black Americans have college degrees, right? Those are disparities that exist, but the EEOC doesn't look at that qualification and say, well, it's against our civil rights law to require a college degree, probably because that would be very unpopular with their friends in universities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair